This presentation is based on this year's LCS, of which is the League of Legends Championship Series, and 2 high-performing teams that participate in this LCS. These are the 2 teams that I'll be talking about in this presentation, Fnatic and 100 Thieves. What I'll be talking about in this presentation is based on their roster on the LCS this year, and some things that they have done that are different to each other, such as staff management, general practices, as well as techniques and tactics that they use and how they differ from each other. First of all, this is the Fnatic's LCS roster with 2 new additions that weren't in previously. These players are Wanda and Razork.
Going down to 2,000, it's going to get smoked. Taken by Razork! What the hell was that, Hilly? Whoa! A double! Man versus the world, he doesn't need anybody else. Body slam goes in, cast goes in, no one can wait, can get a little bit more. Oh my god, the footwork! Surprise to the you absolute man's You god amongst men!
These 2 can be showcased briefly on a video that was uploaded on Fnatic's YouTube channel. This video is called "A Storm is Brewing" for last year's Worlds tournament. These 2 are highlighted as the ones that saved the team and helped them rise towards the win in 2022 and hopefully in 2023 as well. However, since they are new to the team somewhat, they will have to learn their teammates' playstyles and get to know them more than the ones who are already on the roster. Now, back on topic, what is shown is the starting lineup for Fnatic's LCS team and the statistics that most these champions, as well as what lanes they specialize in. Though their statistics aren't outstanding, these are only statistics that are recorded during the tournaments they have participated in whilst in Fnatic. Generally, this is from the last 2 years and is the most reliable information to use to permanently label Fnatic as the fallen champ team, as shown in the video "The Storm is Brewing." Now, what is shown here is the current LCS staff that managed the team, with starting with the head coach Crusher, who managed another team before to the Superliga, which is this League of Legends in Spain, and managed to pull them through to the finals each time in a year.
Top lane, no solo los 2 de primera rotación, sino me quedo con la clave de los 2 de segunda rotación. Tenía muy claro Bisons que en algún momento Oscar de la final podía sacar ese Lucian y que tal vez era la respuesta. Ganando la oleada sin ella sería complicado, pero con esto es probable que tengamos nuevo campeón de Superliga, Fnatic Team Queso, que se va a imponer a Bisons con un 3-0 contundente y por la vía rápida sale Oscura y que lo en 5 segundos. Oscar no se anda con tonterías. Y va con Lexo. Victoria para Fnatic Team Queso, campeones de Superliga.
Also, with 2 assistant coaches, Hiva and Shaves, who are veterans and well experienced in the League of Legends tournament setting. Though they weren't the best of players when they last played, they coached the team based on their experience they've had over the last 5 years of playing within the League of Legends tournament setting, and with this, they are able to make VODs and review them with their team so they can identify counters and weaknesses they have to work on so they can improve in this year's LCS. Now, in League of Legends, there are 2 general types of practices that should be considered. The first type is practicing to learn something new or to improve on something. The second type is practicing the fundamentals of a skill to make it more effortless, minimizing the chance of error, and keeping yourself in top shape. The first way to practice is to try and learn something new or improve on a specific skill set. That includes something like learning champions, champion combos, their ability usage, CSing, which is farming in lane, building and experimenting with these builds, and much more in League of Legends. The second form of practice involves honing the basics of skills you've learnt. This may be thought of as your warm-up. This is the sort of practice you should be doing before each game session. It is entirely up to you what you do during your warm-up, but it is very strongly recommended that you should warm up based only on basics and warm up mechanically. These are the things that both teams have done and still do so that they can attain some advantage of the other team. Some general techniques and skills I will list now that are used in League of Legends are communication. This allows for teammates to help out where and when it is needed, and when used effectively, it can lead to snowballing. An example of communication in League of Legends are the ping system. One example of this is where anyone can ping on the map, use caution, based whether the enemy has map control over an area and telling teammates to be careful in this area. Another example would be the League of Legends party voice. This, in the simplest terms, is a voice chat with your current party members. Snowballing now is keeping ahead of opponents wherever possible. This is usually when they are ahead in kills, level, and gold, but in generally, it's when you have higher statistics than the opponent early game. Kiting is when you force an opponent to follow you around whilst dealing damage to them from a safe distance. Though this is not usually the case, it is applied to most ranged champions, but it is not limited to them. Peeling is the ability to keep your teammates safe from enemy abilities, which is CC, crowd control. Freezing now is not freezing an enemy still, but instead it is wave management technique where you force the opponent's minions to stay in a certain area of the lane. Another wave management technique is shoving. This is a technique which allows your minions to push the enemy tower. This technique can ruin the opposing enemy's tactic of freezing the lane. Zoning is the act of controlling your enemy's position and or making them afraid of entering a zone, of which is the area you can attack in. Zoning occurs when you push enemies back from minions by making them afraid of your area of attack. Usually, this is applied to most bruiser champions and assassin champions that deal high amounts of damage, usually, but it can be applied to anyone. Now I will give some ways that Fnatic practices in general. One way that Fnatic practices in general is by using the practice tool. This is an in-game feature of which allows the player to practice the skills and timings of their abilities at different levels of different builds. This is the second way of practicing, as I mentioned earlier in a previous slide. For example, for Razork, the jungler in Fnatic, he'll need to practice clear timings. This is the time it takes for a jungler to clear out an area of the jungle in order to help his teammates as fast as possible.
Last time he did that, it was the same, not again.
Okay, he's learned from his mistake. He just goes directly to the raptors. I like it.
But you can do both, no?
Yeah, you just have to E it, not auto attack it.
Oh, okay. Look at this.
Okay, he's doing it.
Which tree?
Actually, remind me to touch every time Harry gets jungle. It's so cute.
Oh, 331. I mean, that was kind of nice.
Another way that Fnatic practices is just by playing with each other in public games or custom games. This helps them familiarize themselves with each other and learn each other's playstyles. This is especially helpful in teamfights, which is a huge factor in League of Legends, and is part of the deciding factors of winning the game and controlling the map. In these team practices, the head coach and other players would criticize each other's plays and map processes when engaging an opponent or doing certain things. These are typically what happens in most professional teams, but for Fnatic, in this case, they decide to play together and dive into each other's roles to learn the aspects of what makes this role hard and what they are supposed to do, and how other roles are supposed to help them. In this slide, I will list some skills, techniques, and use of tactics that some Fnatic members use. Now, in League of Legends, each role requires a different skill set and mindset. For example, a mid laner has the most damage in the team, but is usually the one with the lowest health points. Therefore, the mindset needed for this role would be that they are cautious but also bold, since it allows them to snowball ahead of their enemy. The skills that are needed for a mid laner would be to dodge skill shots successfully and avoiding as much damage as possible whilst being able to infiltrate the backline of opponents so that the team can push forward later in game to secure, if not the most kills, out of the whole team in the first 20 minutes of the game. A tactic that the new bot laner Rackles uses is an aggressive, passive-aggressive playstyle when pushing lane and farm for gold and XP whilst letting his support poke the opponents, which further pushes the enemies further. This is usually the technique shoving. Another tactic that these players use is controlling the map with wards, which allows them to have vision through this mechanic called Fog of War, which usually prevents players from seeing a particular area that is not seen by the character, an ally's ward, or minion. Some techniques that Fnatic's players use are snowballing when ahead to widen the gap between the opponents and themselves, as well as freezing a lane, which forces the opponent's minions to stay in particular spots unless the opponent pushes more aggressively. But by doing this, they can get punished more easily. This is usually how ganks are set up, usually, and so that this lane is winning instead of the other way around. How is Fnatic's League of Legends roster managed? Fnatic's League of Legends roster is managed by the head of coach, of which in 2023 is now Gonçalo Crusher Pinto Brandao, who has previously helped Fnatic win in spring, as well as strategic coach Hiva, who will serve as the team's new assistant coach. With these two veterans and Shaves, the team will learn some of the tactics and skills they have learned and incorporate it into their games. They used to watch over Fnatic's League Academy games and would be able to point out what the main team is lacking and how to improve it in order to win this year's LCS. Veterans like these are usually the staff that coach and manage the team, and is usually built around their tactics and how they identify problems as well. Now, in this scene, this is the 100 Thieves roster, of which 100 Thieves made up. This team is made up of young talents and veteran players, which can be said the same about the other team, of which the veterans are in this team are Doublelift and Bjerkensen. This was last stated on the 25th of February as they beat Team Liquid by 1-0. You can clearly see the differences between young talent and veterans, as they generally have a skill gap between them, and this is just on average. With Doublelift having the most champ kills out of the roster and having the least worthless deaths, meaning that he has the most experience and mechanical play in the team. This way he'll be able to teach and give advice to his teammates who are struggling to keep up, generally to the younger talents Closer and Tenacity and Busio. In this scene, I'll be talking about the stuff of 100 Thieves roster. Now, Cass has been hired by 100 Thieves to serve as the head coach. This coach is the Belgian former professional athlete who joined the coaching staff of Mad Lions in 2019 after playing his final game for Diffuse Kids. He worked with Mac for 3 years when he was employed by the company. Cass will hold the position of head coach for the first time ever in his career. His helper or assistant coach will be Nuke Duck, as he was regarded for many years as a very gifted player who was close to reaching his peak, but unfortunately he fell short of standards. He's currently no longer playing professionally and focusing on his career as an assistant coach as of now. In addition to the primary team coaches, Jungle Juice has been elevated to general manager. Previously, he oversaw the team's strategy and analytics. Now, Chimera is the LCS head analyst. The coaching staff for the 100 Thieves challenges will be comprised of Dandin and Kirei, as is Ryan will serve as the team manager last. Some ways that 100 Thieves practices on League of Legends is similar to Fnatic but different in some ways. The ways that the practices are similar is that they both practice mechanics in practice tool, and they practice doing what their role specializes in, whether that's clearing out minions, wave management, skill shot dodging, or even clearing out the jungle in the fastest time possible. However, one way that 100 Thieves practices are different to Fnatic's is that they challenge veterans like the Baus, who is the #1 Sun player in Europe, while 100 Thieves player Yasuo challenges them. Through this experience, Yasuo would learn how to play against Sun players through the best user of the champion, as he would know the skills, the weaknesses, and strengths, as it would be happening live. After they play each other, 100 Thieves takes the VOD and reviews it and teaches it to the rest of the players so that in turn, when they face this champion, they know the ins and outs of it. Most of 100 Thieves' current tactics now would be based on Jungle Juice's advice for the players and analysis of other players' playstyles and how to play around them. Also, Cass, the head coach of 100 Thieves' LCS team, would oversee these players' games and criticize them and their thought process in order for Jungle Juice and other staff members to help them with their improvements and counters to other rivals, like Team Liquid, for example, who would do the exact same. Jungle Juice and coaches would run through scenarios of common plays that rival teams do on a League of Legends map like this to see how they counter it at first and how they communicate to each other when engaging. Therefore, so if any of their players are out of position, they can fix that and attune it to their current play and benefit from it so that they are able to win the next LCS game. The differences based on what I've said so far is that Fnatic's LCS team is generic when practicing, and that they are inexperienced with each other compared to Wonder Thieves. However, Fnatic's team is more adaptable to whatever they play against, whereas for Wonder Thieves, they play by their coach's experience and tactics mostly. Another difference is that Wonder Thieves also has a special training camp for elite players, which is separate to their academy, whereas Fnatic players play at home with each other or at Fnatic's own academy. Thank you a lot for listening to my presentation on 100 Thieves and Fnatic. Do you guys have any questions?